You are listening to Latinx America, a podcast focused on highlighting catalysts who are using, leveraging, or creating technology to help our community achieve more. With your host, Adriana Flores Ragade. Martha, thank you so much for joining us at Latinx America. It's a pleasure to have you and to learn more about you and your story, not just your personal story, but also your journey into tech. So why don't we start with getting to know Martha a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I love your program and hearing all the stories of those that you've invited. And so I'm flattered that it's my turn. How I began really is not something that I thought I would do. Like it wasn't an outcome when I started in college and thinking, one day I want to be a tech entrepreneur. It wasn't really in that way. It was more like seeing that my community, and when I talk about my community, I usually define it by those in low wage work, struggling to make ends meet, living in survival, in generational poverty. And so when I noticed my community living in this cycle of inefficiency, I knew that I could do something about it. And working in retail, service, hospitality, where I saw this dynamic growing gap between those deciding who got promotions and jobs versus those who didn't, really woke up this interest in figuring out why. And so I went from being a recruiter to being a recruitment manager to being an executive in talent acquisition and talent management, and really began implementing new ways and just really learning, like, how are people, adapting to the things that my team recommends. And that's when I figured out a couple things that worked. And the only way that I could see this be applied in a global way was through technology. So the last 5 years, 4 to 5 years of my career, when I knew I was gonna, make a transition, I actually focused in learning technical implementations, integrations, so that I could be an expert also in buying, in implementing, and utilizing systems in the talent space.
So you were in the HR unit, and then you had this idea because you had a passion for helping our community advance. But how did you make the decision to quit your job, because you were getting a salary, a consistent salary, right? And go out into the world of entrepreneurship and launch your own company. What was the process like?
Yeah, the process was really difficult at first. I heard people be really supportive. Yeah, whatever you need, like, I'll make the introductions, I'll connect you. Yes, we need that product. But when, excuse my language, when shit hit the fan, and I was already working on this thing and being on my own, like, it felt like I was alone. And so what really helped this transition was planning. And so implementing the same thing I do with people that use the MadeBoss platform is figuring out the big dream, right? Like, where are you headed? And then working out a backwards plan. And for me as an entrepreneur was, I need to save money, because before leaving my job, I applied for, at the time, there was the Avion program. Jesse Martinez and Del Dep were leading that effort, and it was exposing Latinas into venture capital dynamics, and in hopes that we would get funding to take our ventures to the next level. And even though I didn't have a product then and I was still employed, they let me in the program. And so here I am, executive management, taking my vacation to be able to, do this program. I spent a week with the group in San Francisco, traveling across Silicon Valley, meeting investors like Sequoia, etc. More so traditional investors, and the Capors as an example. But that's when I realized that that was not going to be for me. That everyone who essentially was in search for that story was disillusioned. And I realized quickly that I didn't meet all the requirements they had of the founders that they traditionally fund. And I wasn't in the same starting line as many of them. And so I had to be really real with myself, where I was. And so I thought, okay, in order to get traction into the app, I have to build the app. In order to build the app, I have to have a tech founder or a tech co-founder or a tech partner. In order to do that, then I have to have a storyline of what this thing needs to look like a design. In order to build that, I need to design. So, it was like, what do I need right now? And what I needed at that moment was I needed to save money so I could pay for these things. And initially, like for the beginning of what it would be MadeBoss. Once I did that, I spent around 5 to 8 grand for my savings, was able to develop like the first phase of what the MadeBoss version 1 would look like. And then that led me to look at crowdfunding, very, very new. And we were lucky enough that, through my background, because I'm an expert in talent acquisition, talent management, I knew the problem. And the fact that we had implemented MadeBoss in a methodology, and that I spend a little money in making sure that people could see it, right, through the design,
Mm-hmm.
that we could actually put together a deck that we could now raise through an equity crowdfund, and invited my community to do that. So it wasn't sort of a one day to the next, I'm going to leave my job and just do it. I'm a single mom. I
Mm-hmm.
support my parents. I own a home in the Bay Area. I can't just like let it all be, right? Nobody's going to come out and save me. So I had to be really, really strategic about this transition, and plan for the worst. And believe me, the worst happened, like hitting bottom, not knowing like what to do next, because you run out of funding, or you're running out of funding, and then just doing like all the prayers that you can do, and figuring out what the very next step would be to help you to get up. um, this is typical, and it's not for everybody, because if you're in a position where you are used to your paycheck regularly and not struggle and think about what that's going to look like if you don't have that, it's very, very stressful. And I kept thinking, well, vengo de nada, I come from nothing. What can I lose, right? And so yeah, I have a lot to lose, but at the same time, I come from very little. So I have so much more to gain. And that kept me fueled to keep going. So for people who don't necessarily see themselves resilient enough to stick with something that you truly believe in. Otherwise, you're going to be jumping from idea to idea, figuring out what the next big thing is going to be. It's going to, then you're going to become one of those I call them the fashionista entrepreneurs. Like, I just made up that term, which is, you're out there for the buzz. You're out there for the invitation to the panel, for people putting your name in an actual magazine or article. And believe me, I got a lot of that without having anything, but it didn't fulfill why I was doing this. So I had to
Mm-hmm.
really look deep inside on why am I building this, and what am I willing to do to get there.
So let's go on why you're building this. Can you tell us first of all what is Made Boss, how you came up with the name, and why you're building it?
Yeah, so MadeBoss is the way in which we describe it now, because we're implementing several machine learning, even learning processing AI in essence, that it's a smart talent assistant. And we help both employers and employees understand opportunity and maximize talent, in this case, untapped talent. And how we came up with the name Made Boss, made by own self, is because in essence, there's a journey that we need to follow. And sometimes when we're not strategic about where we could be, we get lost in the many potential places of where we could be. And so for people who don't really have that social capital, or that one manager that really likes you, taps you in the shoulder and says, you should really look into this next position, which happens a lot in and with individuals that have influence and come
Mhm.
from backgrounds of influence, that we needed to be really clear with those who had never seen themselves other than what is available to them. So, as an example, in the Latino community, you ask a kid, and for the most part, they're going to say they want to be, a soccer player, they want to be a police officer, a teacher, a doctor, right? Those are professions that are visible to us, careers. Well, the future of work looks really different. And we're not going to be in places where we are going to categorize or be categorized based on the degree we get or based on the careers we choose, but rather on the competencies and what we're really good at that will become indispensable for companies. And so, in order for me to be able to fulfill that for companies that right now are struggling to meet those middle to top positions where most people are getting paid really good money, we need to kind of dilute our thinking from this traditional track that if you're a janitor now, the next step is to become essentially in the grocery business a cashier, and then you'll become a front end manager, and then a store manager, and then you'll go into corporate and do some analysis work. It doesn't work like that anymore. And so your traditional systems that are available out there, they're doing that for people, and they're telling our people that there's this one way to do it, which is taking so much time to get there. Even when you're employed and a company gives you resources to learn, they tell you, oh, we have a partnership with so and so university and you can get a bachelor's degree, or now we can utilize Coursera and go learn. But learn what, and for what, and what am I going to be really good at, and what are the available opportunities really? So what we do is we say, look, you don't have to look further. Let's just be real on what's available in the company that you're at right now. In 2 years, actually right now and within 2 years, these are the opportunities that are going to pay you the most, and you already have 60% of that. Here's what you're missing, and when that what you're missing, we give you a plan. Here's a class, here's a certification, here's a project. And then we show you, now you're ready to apply for this job, which takes you to, 3 levels up. You're not going to be earning $20 more an hour. Like, that's freaking strategic and clear and available for people to see exactly what they're doing and what is it that they're doing, how it's going to take them to that next level. And the same for companies. We can show them what behavior and what learning behavior from the employee is going to help them compete in the next 3 years. And so the why I'm doing it is because I'm tired of having wasted so much time figuring it out. And we don't have to. I mean, we don't have to figure out how we're going to go to the grocery store and buy something if we don't have a car. There's already so much out there for us that we can access. Why not in our careers?
That sounds like something strategic, and just given your background in HR, something that made sense in terms of finding a solution for something where you already have an expertise, right? So your customers, who is your target market both for the consumer side and also potential partners? Because we do have, we're fortunate to have listeners that work in VC. That I've gotten messages from people that are in different roles within companies. So, what would you say to them?
Yeah, thank you. Look, I gave a lot of opportunity to people when I was an executive and I had a $3 million budget. I bought systems that I believed in. So if you're someone that has access to calling the shots, like you can make the decision, then I need to talk to you. We've been approached by people who believe, we should be connected with ABCD individual in their companies. But the reality is that we're facing the same bias that employees that are entry level are facing at the job. Right? We don't have a track record of building this product and 700 companies using it and a million users. We don't have that. So let's just be really real. We just finished our pilot. We learned a lot. We just signed on our first SaaS annual contract with a company headquartered out of Oakland. I know, I'm really excited. It happened 2 weeks ago. And this is a company that models what we are going towards in terms of our target market. It's a company that has limited resources in building a culture that's a learning culture given the type of employee they have, right? In East Oakland is primarily African American and Latino living in poverty. So that's who they employ. And they're having difficulty supporting them to take their employee base to the next level, meaning getting promoted or getting permanent post, because it's a security services company, into the companies that they partner with. So we've come in to not only support the employee growth, but also the employer to have the right systems in place to ensure that they're supporting the development of every employee as they should, right? So that if an employee makes a mistake, as an example, you don't fire them. Because again, let's be real, who are you employing? People who have not had dinner conversations with mom and dad about the culture of work. So we want to work with companies who realize who their available employee base is and are struggling to, one, hire them and keep them, and then promote them. And we found that essentially, that is encompassed or is embodied by accelerators that are investing in companies that want to create good jobs. We found that social driven investors want to look into our product because they want to make sure that people with low wage jobs have access to upper mobility. We have found that educational institutions are interested in our product because of the potential we have to not only work with the actual employer, but also make this tool available to any workforce development or even educational institution that this employer may work with. So this ecosystem we're building is in keeping our mission like really, really real, right? And this is why we knew that at the beginning, VC wasn't for us. The traditional VC wasn't for us. We need to prove that this works because everybody else sees acquisition of talent very differently. So, yeah, anyone who believes that there's a better way to support people coming out of poverty, and I'm not just saying like anyone, like this is the majority of people in the world, not just in America. In fact, in America, over 50% of people earn less than $15 an hour. That's my target market, right? Anyone who employs that $15 an hour individual, I want to work with you. And it is no secret that those earning low wages are more likely to be unemployed than to be promoted. It's no secret. So when thinking about the impact that you and I, whoever's listening to me, wants to do in the world, and you've been looking at this as a problem that can be fixed with the next talent, applicant tracking system that either takes the name out of the resume or, focuses on different demographics to be able to get people in the door or reviewed by recruitment, like come and talk to me, because I'll tell you, regardless of the systems that you put in place, there's still somebody making a decision. And that somebody needs to be informed and educated in their biases and unbiases or unconscious biases, that are driving the decision making. And so we've included that employer manager education into our setup because we know how critical that is in creating equal opportunity in the workplace.
So it's a tool that HR departments, whether it's, you mentioned, a grocery store, a school district, higher education institutions, or a tech company can use to help with pathways for their talent, right?
Yes. And whether they have the data or not, like as an example, we need simple data like job descriptions. We need to know your 5-year strategic plan. We need to know whether or not you have a core competency methodology. And that really means, do you understand the talents and skill sets that your workforce needs to have right now versus what they need to have in the next year, right? So whether they have that or not, we can work with them. If they don't have that, we implement our setup process, which is what we're doing with our current company. And if they have that, then we integrate with those systems that have that data available.
So Martha, besides not having the social capital and the guidance and some of the other things we know that's happening right now in our community, what would you say are some of the other challenges that we face as a community and that you face as an entrepreneur?
Miedo. We face fear in every freaking angle.
Hmm.
Fear to make a decision on something that you believe in. So if you're an investor, there's fear that you have to follow the same traditional systematic processes that have made that one institution successful, and if you don't follow it, then your job is in the line. So it is unlikely that people like me will be able to win in that space. Fear of trying something new, because again, what's worked with or what's worked for company ABCD should also work for you, so you go with the traditional systems that are available to you, and so going with something that's not proven, it's risky. um, Fear to buy a product like ours, just like I said earlier. So I face all of that. And even when we were raising capital from our community, we had 70% of our investors. We actually reached 270% of our goal, 17% of our goal, and 70% of our investors were Latino, majority Latina, first time investors, right? And we opened it up for people to be able to invest $50 all the way to whatever you could invest based on your income and assets. But even $50 was so difficult to get for that fear. Now, if I would have had 1,000 people investing $1,000, I would have made a million in less than 3 months. We would have been in such a different position as an organization. But there's fear. And I think until we believe that we could achieve greatness is when we're going to let loose on saying yes, on supporting, on becoming champions of people that look like us, internalizing the stupidity of, biases on what success looks like, whether you know it or not, is impacting your decisions every day. It impacted mine as a recruitment manager. I remember hiring really tall store managers. I'm like, oh my God, why are my store managers all tall? Well, in my mind, and just like in every America's mind, in fact, most CEOs are really, really tall. They're like 5'9" and above. Is that we see,
With good hair.
yeah, exactly. We see height as a correlation to success, right? And that success means ability to influence and have presence. So whether we know it or not, we're making decisions every day that are impacting people like me and like you, and the possibility of making real change. Now, I left a job that paid me upwards of 150,000 a year, plus all the bonuses, including those bonuses, and then the other things that I did to diversify my income. So I was really close to 200. You think that risk is going to be something that I'm going to take lightly? No. So when there's an opportunity to invest in someone like me who's done so much to get to where I'm at, and we still have that little thing that says, I still don't know though, then you really have to look inside yourself. You need to check that.
And I would say that's fear, and at the same time is being unaware too. I think that maybe we haven't been exposed to the models of success. And like you said, traditionally we think of A goes to B and then B goes to C. We need to kind of think out of the box and really embrace our community and the work that we're doing, because for many people it's not a straight line of how we get to achieve success, right? So
Yeah.
what I liked about your story too is that the crowdfunding, even though $50 was hard for some people, how much did you raise? Well, it
Yeah.
was through Republic, right?
Yeah, through Republic, we raised upwards of 150,000. Thousand. So that money was critical to bringing on board tech talent and growing and launching our first MVP. And now we're building our dashboard for the employer to be able to see all these behaviors. Like that little money has has been a miracle, really.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what the sad thing is? Not sad. It's just, again, back to the reality check. We got other investments. So we have one venture capital investor, Camelback, and they focus on
Mm-hmm.
education mostly. And so they invested in us 40,000, and then they gave us an opportunity to be a part of their accelerator. But one
Mm-hmm.
thing that I learned in being a part of this movement was that there are others out there who are creating incredible companies, don't get me wrong, and organizations, but they've raised like upwards of 500,000, 800,000, and they're looking at me and where I'm at right now with that little money, and closed our first like annual contract and saying, wow, I can't believe that. And
Mm-hmm.
going back to this resiliency and ability to work with very little, it's not something you see on a daily day basis, right? We have to. It's sad that it has to happen. That's where I was getting. It's sad that it has to happen in that way, but I recognize my position and know that eventually, when thinking about what's in it for us next, is that people are going to see this example, my example, and many others as examples to say it shouldn't be that way, right? If you have access, it shouldn't be that way. We can make something happen and be different for you. And I feel like Camelback did that for me. I didn't get any funding here locally in the Bay, but an investor out of New Orleans saw me for who I was. They saw my hustle, they saw my passion. I feel like they fell in love with me and with my idea and with my product, and they back me up. They open doors. They recommend me for things like I just got an email from the Bill and Gates Melinda Foundation for a full scholarship to attend a conference in San Diego. They're paying for airfare. They're paying for my stay and my food. So literally, I just show up, and then they put me in front of all these ed tech investors. Like, that's the level of access that the right fit venture capitalist or program will do for you, because they understand you.
So the Camelback Ventures, right? So
Yes.
how did you get plugged in with them, and how can others that are listening potentially do the same?
Yeah. So how I got plugged in with them is maybe not necessarily like the traditional way, but I'll tell you how most people get plugged in, and then I'll tell you how I got plugged in. Most people get plugged in by looking at other entrepreneurs that you follow, that you admire, that you see, that they're pitching when you go to events. See who's invested in them. See what accelerators they've done. And then going to those websites. And what I did now is I have a calendar for the rest of the next 2 years on programs based on size, what I've raised, and traction, to know what should I be applying next and why. Is it capital or
Mhm.
is it access? And so that's how you should do it, right? Look at the people you really like, what they've done, who's behind them, and then go check out how you fit in that model. How I got plugged into Camelback was one of our investors through the Republic campaign, right? The crowd fund,
Mhm.
reached out and said, "Hey, Marta, this is what I do, and I have this opportunity in retail, and I think you should come check it out. It's a conference in Chicago." I went to the conference, I, paid my own, and then met people who were investing in solutions for low wage workers in retail, any solution. And I didn't even have the product at the time because we had just raised. But I went to a panel where they were launching a new fund. And in that panel was a woman from Walmart Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation and several other foundations. Well, the woman from the Walmart Foundation said something that triggered. And towards the end, I asked a question which triggered her. And we just had a little moment in connection. And I approached her and introduced myself. Well, I sent a thank you email after the fact, all that. 3 months later, she emails me and says, "Marta, you should consider applying to Camelback." And I had never heard of this program. I checked it out. I applied. I didn't even know anyone that had actually done the program. Eventually, I saw someone who did it, and then I, asked her about it. But that's how it happened. And, putting myself out there, not necessarily for what's going to happen right now, but I just offered how I could help her. And then eventually she found something that was a fit for me.
And not being afraid to put yourself out there can make a big difference. And like you said, in this case, you invested in flying out to the conference, and now you're in a position where people are inviting you and flying you out to speak at conferences, which takes me to the next question, which is what's in store for you in the future? What would you say to people that are, you know, thinking about doing something similar, or or that are just inspired by what you're doing?
Yeah. Um, it's totally okay to have that 9 to 5 job and be cool with your job, travel, have your family, do your thing. It's totally okay. Not everybody has to have this level of cajones, right? How we say it, to be able to do something and change the world. And it sounds amazing. But for those who are not ready to take that leap, maybe you should support people that have taken the leap or that want to take the leap. And supporting those people sounds just like what's happening right now with my team. My CTO could no longer stay with me 100% because he needed to make some money and support his family. So that's a reality we face. So instead of saying, okay, well, thank you and goodbye, we looked at ways in which he could continue to stay involved because he's an asset to us, right? We trust him and he trusts us. He's a part of us. So he became our advisor now and lead technologist. So he's helping me continue to help me oversee technology building. The second piece is anytime I pitch, I always recruit people without wanting to recruit people. So the woman that's now leading our design strategy, Jeanette, she's doing this because she believes in the product and in me. And so she has her full-time job. And now she's doing this on the side too. The same with Fabiola. She was out here. She saw me at Cape when I did I think it was like a weekend thing for people operations, and we won second place. And since then, developed a relationship. And when she had the time, now she's doing her MBA in Chicago. She now has the time to help, and she reached out, and now she's leading all of our research strategy as it relates to our product. I went to Paraguay to do bullying of all things that, I make money on the side with little conferences and stuff. So I did bullying prevention for Paraguay. La Embajada Americana, American Embassy, hired me to do that. So I went out there and they asked me if I, out of my time, this is volunteer, if I could talk to some women in engineering. Of course. So that evening, instead of resting and drinking wine, I went and I spoke with this group. Then Clara emails me and says, Marta, I am so impressed. I want to be a part of it. Clara is now finishing her bachelor's in engineering, and she is fantastic. Like, and now she's leading our user and part of the changes we're making on our app based on what we learned from our first pilot. And the team that I have in Mexico, I was really interested in figuring out how to best support, Mexican developers that would be an asset also to our platform, and that we would also be supportive of that ecosystem and growth. So I just went and learned about it in Guadalajara. I went to visit family, and I'm like, who do you know that I should meet? And I spent like 3 days just meeting after meeting after meeting. And my last meeting, I met my team, who's now leading our entire dashboard, feasibility study, implementation, and actual development. So, for those who are listening and you're doing your one job, look around and see where your area of expertise is best needed. Look around, and if you're not ready to take this leap in changing the world, then you can be a part of something that is small right now that could be something really big later. And if you are already in that transition phase, everybody says don't give up, and sometimes it's okay to give up. Like, I gave up on my idea that at the beginning I was like, MadeBoss, this is the way to do it. This is the right platform. This is the right solution. I gave up on that. And I said, you know what? What am I here for? I'm here to solve this problem. Okay. Does it matter how? No. Then my job is to figure it out. Right. So I gave up on this stubbornness that had to be this way. And then for those who are already in that stage of doing it and are not giving up is that I need to know who you are because I want you in my ecosystem of badass chingones who are not giving up and want to change this shit around. And so together we can make it happen. And we need to stay inspired and we need to stay grounded and we also need to stay woke. What are the resources out there and start plugging each other out or each other in.
Each other in. Well, one of the things that you mentioned about every time you speak, and I've heard you speak numerous times, and I always learn something new about you. So if someone is listening to Marta and you want to help, whether it's by funding or by joining or contributing to her team, how can they reach you?
Yeah, so you can reach my email. It's Marta with an H, Martha Hernandez, HERNANDEZ at MadeBoss. So it's MadeBoss.com. That's my email. And I'm on social. MadeBoss is on every platform. So I'm pretty good about responding to people and making sure that if anything, we have a quick call or have coffee and figure out, how can we build this this ecosystem of support.
Thank you, Martha. One last question for you. Who inspired you the most, and why?
Who inspired me the most?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, this is gonna sound like egotistic, but I have to be really real with people that it's okay to love yourself. So when I think of myself and what I've gone through, like I'm super inspired. Like, and then I get emotional. Like this little girl who came from this really small town and sold chicken, right, to help her family survive, to think she can do this big thing, like, fuck, I get inspired. And if I could hug her when 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 she made a commitment to change the world or to not give up on something that um I want other women, other young men who in some way feel unseen, disrespected, undeserving, etc., that there's a big opportunity for us and it just we just have to really become inspired by the journey we've had or find inspiration in some way. But I do get inspired by that young woman who could have taken the easy route because no one was expecting anything from me. My parents didn't expect it from me. They didn't even expect me to graduate from high school. Like that's the reality. We come from a very, very poor background and working was like the big thing. So to push that envelope and to be in a place where I'm dreaming really, really big, it's inspiring.
With that, we will end the interview, and I want to thank you for inspiring us today. I'll be here to support you in whatever
Thank you.
way I can. And when you're ready for the next round of funding, or when you're ready to do, to ask for something, please let me and let us know, because this is how we're building a community. And my hope is that through stories like yours, through examples like you, we can do a lot more for our community and build that social capital, because I think social capital makes a big difference. And if somebody like you did what you're doing right now, or achieves as much as you're achieving, there is that other little girls that are coming along the way that will be inspired and that will be able to do even more. So thank you so much for sharing your story, Marta.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Saludos a todos. Have a good one.
Saludos. Gracias.
Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Latinx America and on Twitter at America Latinx, or email any questions or ideas to latinxamerica@gmail.com. Gracias y hasta la próxima semana.